Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the CombiBiz webinar on writing successful Horizon 2020 proposals. A really important topic, of course, for everybody involved in research and science, and particularly important as coming up now, just being published, are the latest work programs for the last phase of Horizon 2020. And obviously, in parallel, the discussions are starting about the next wave, or FP9. So we're hoping that many of you involved in the whole area of bioeconomy, which, as we all know, is a very huge topic, will take in a lot of the hints and tips that our speakers today are going to share with you. This is being recorded, this CombiBiz webinar, and you will be able to link to this via the CombiBiz website afterwards or via our YouTube channel. So I'm Rhonda Smith, I'm the coordinator of CombiBiz, and my company Minerva is obviously heavily involved in this project, and we've really enjoyed working over the last 2.5 years of many researchers and with many projects driving innovation across the whole of the bioeconomy sector, and we do hope that will continue. Next slide, please. Just a few words then on CombiBiz before we start. You may have known that yesterday was World Food Day, and as part of our efforts to help drive information out and engage with people on this vital topic, we published our latest Bioeconomy Innovation magazine, which you can see here up on the screen, and also linked via our website via the link that you see below. As well, fairly recently, we've created a short video about CombiBiz and the services that it provides. As well as webinars, we provide the creation of project briefs. We have other kinds of webinars where projects can present to experts, and we also have meetings, our final ones coming up in Prague and Budapest in November this year, and in February next year in 2018. But that's enough about CombiBiz. Just to give you a bit of background on that, we're delighted to welcome Valentina and Gabriella from Europe Media to take us through this webinar today. And obviously here from the UK, we are particularly interested in making sure that our last efforts to engage with Horizon 2020 are as successful as possible. So over to you both, and we look forward to hearing all about your hints and tips.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you very much for the invitation as well to Minerva and of course CombiBiz as well. Welcome everyone. So we are Gabriella, Lovasz and Valentina and Zuri. Nice to meet you via online meet. And we would like to give you a few tips indeed on our Horizon 2020 proposal development. But first, again, also I would like to introduce just a little bit to you the company itself. So if you go to the next slide, and then the next one, then just a few short sentences that we are part of a group which is called the EMG Group, together with Leonardo Environmental Technologies and Europa Media non-profit. We are all based in Budapest in Hungary, and the mission of Europa Media is to provide information about EU funding in general, but more specifically because of the demand, we're focusing on Horizon 2020 Research and Innovation Framework Program and how to apply to this program, how to put together winning projects, and also after that, if you're successful, and hopefully you will be, then we're also helping beneficiaries to manage their projects successfully. We have put together a few projects in the past. We started in 1999, and the approach of the company is that Leonardo basically is a project management company dealing with energy and environmental related projects. Europa Media nonprofit has also become now more a project management company that is dealing with software project in the field of education, training, information communication technologies, entrepreneurship, SME development, and so on. So these two companies and the experts working within these two companies know how to submit successful proposal. This is what they do on an everyday basis. And then they go to a training course, and as a trainer, they share the experience basically on an everyday, what they have on an everyday basis. So that is the approach. And based on that, we have organized a few successful courses and managed a few successful projects in the past. You can see the numbers on the slide. If you go to the next slide, then it's just a view on the next upcoming courses in case you are interested. But now if you go to the next one, I give the floor back to Valentina. She will start the actual practical tips on proposal development.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Let's get a little bit more practical. So in the next slide, first of all, I would like to give you some general remarks on Horizon 2020 because some of these remarks might be quite different from national grants or from any other type of grant that you're used at. So the very first thing you should know about Horizon 2020 is that your proposal will be submitted in response to a topic which is included in a call for proposal, which is described in a work program. Work programs are these strategic documents that are published every 2 or 3 years by the European Commission, and they are actually put together by scientific experts, stakeholders from the industry and the business sector. So it's also a good idea not only to start looking for calls within these documents, but also to understand the research agenda setting. So how these calls are put together, by whom, and how to actually contribute to the design of the upcoming ones. We are now in the finalization of the 2016-2017 work program. So in a couple of weeks, you should be able to check the last and the latest one for 2018-2020. Having said this, most of the work programs, with a few exceptions, mainly from the scientific excellence pillar, are top-down specifications, have top-down specifications, in the sense that the European Commission is giving basically you a challenge or a problem with very specific requirements as to how you should be solving that challenge. So you cannot really come up with your own idea, excellent idea, but rather you should be responding to the challenge posed by the Commission, which is very important because it doesn't matter then how scientifically excellent or how well planned your proposal is. If it doesn't really fulfill all the necessary requirements by the Commission, most probably it will not be able to be funded. A third detail is that competition is at the EU level, or rather at the program level. So there are no specific national quotas, but rather only the best projects will be awarded grants, independently from whether the coordinator is based in one country or in another. Which means, of course, that you have a lot of competition in Europe, but on the other hand, of course, your chances maybe are also a little bit higher. Then for Horizon 2020, transnational cooperation, multidisciplinarity are really, really essential factors. On one hand, there's always a minimum partnership requirement, which is typically 3 legal entities coming from 3 different EU member states or associated countries. On the other hand, also, they're really looking for a proof or an evidence that your project could not be achieving the same impact or the same results without having a widespread European breadth, let's say. The same goes for multidisciplinarity. So they're really looking for different disciplines to work together. They really want to stop seeing researchers from different fields working in silos, let's say. So as much as you can, try to have this cross-fertilization between different disciplines. And finally, your proposal will not be actually evaluated by the Commission itself, but rather by independent experts. So on one hand, it's a good idea to, first of all, understand the evaluation process, how the whole evaluation works, the criteria for being awarded. And on the other hand, it is maybe good to know that actually yourself, as a scientific expert in a specific field, can apply to become an expert for the Commission. So try to really apply to register for the database of experts and get a first-hand experience of the evaluation process, because putting yourself in an evaluator's shoes maybe can help a little bit more the proposal development phase as well. So moving to the next slide. where to start, basically, when developing a proposal. So there are usually two different ways. Either you start with a specific project idea that you have been thinking about maybe for a few years and you're looking for funding for that specific idea, or on the other hand, you don't have anything specific right now in your plans, but rather a general interest in a specific field. Either way, it's always a good idea to screen through different work programs and not look simply at the work program that is the closest to your research field. Because more and more frequently, the Commission is including transdisciplinarity, as we just mentioned, in its work programs. So you might find very interesting calls for proposals and topics in unexpected work programs, let's say. So try to open up a little bit your research, and you may find very interesting funding opportunities that fit your idea, though maybe they may have some different disciplines involved. Once you have found the work program topic or the call for proposal that you like, of course, make sure that your project idea actually fits it really 100%. We just mentioned this. These are mostly top-down calls for proposals. So try to really make sure that your objectives, methodologies, activities, as well as impact are really fully aligned with the requirements by the Commission. Going forward, I will actually give back the floor to Gabriella, who can give you some useful tips and resources for partner search.
All right, so just a few things about partner searching. It is actually not so difficult to find the proper partners. Of course, you have to be in time, so to say, because there might be a few partners who will be really, really important to have a successful project submitted. So make sure that if a work program is published, let's say, as now 3 years in advance, then make sure that you kind of book the partners in time so that they are committed to you, your project ID and your consortium, and then you will be able to work on the details of the proposal later on. But first, you have to make sure that the partners are available for you and for your project. So here are a few tips, where to find these partners. Probably events might be interesting for you, but you have to start with your own network. So first, choose those 2 or 3 key partners who you know, or at least one of your core partners know them. And then, based on the core partnership, try to extend then the networks through the connections of your core partners, because this is the start. You have to trust your partners, at least the core partners, in order to be able to work on all of the details and then delegate all of the tasks and then give them the necessary budget and so on. After 15 years of experience, I can say that writing a cold email to a partner who you want to really involve will not be surprising to that particular partner. They are used to that, especially if we talk about a really good organization that has a specific expertise in a field that you need for your project. So they will not be surprised, and they will not delete your email if you share some of the hints of your project ID. Now, not all of that, of course, because you want to be, of course, protective on your ID and the details, but if you give them what is special about your project ID, then they get interested. Then you can sign with them, as an example, a non-disclosure agreement, and then you can work on all of the details. You can give them the more detailed description of your concept, and then they will be happy to get committed. So it's not probably an unexpected thing for them to get involved and get invited into these projects. So don't be afraid of approaching someone with a cold email, or just go to someone at an event where they attend the event, because they will be happy to work on a good idea in Horizon 2020. Next slide. Could we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So you have to consider geographical balance, if that makes sense in the project. So you do not have to involve different partners from East, West, North, and South Europe. That's not the point. But if you would like to achieve an impact on a European level, you have to make sure that there is a right geographical balance and there is a reach to the target group directly in a way. So that is important. Nowadays, it is more and more important to involve the key partners who will be responsible for exploitation, which means that you will generate certain results in your project, a product or service or a knowledge. You will contribute to standardization or anything else. And then you have to make sure that someone will become responsible for the exploitation. It doesn't have to be necessarily commercial, even if that's, of course, very welcome by the Commission. And the evaluators, still, if you have a good idea for the exploitation, you have to make sure that you have the proper partner dealing with that, who has their really specific interest in exploiting the result, because this is mostly missing from the consortia nowadays in Horizon 2020. You can lose on a really good idea if you don't have someone who will make sure that those results that you generate in the project get used. I think that will be the most important message in terms of partnership. You might think of additional ideas such as involving end users, involving a representative from your direct target groups and so on, in case that makes sense for the project itself. All right, and now if you go to the next section, then I give back the floor to Valentina, how to make your proposal bulletproof.
Okay, so let's start giving some more maybe practical tips. Can you move to the next slide? Okay, so the very first check that the Commission is going to make on your proposal, even before starting the scientific evaluation, is they will check whether your proposal falls within scope of the topic, of the work program topic that you are addressing. We mentioned this already before. These are mostly top-down types of calls for proposal. So you should always make sure that your objectives, activities, means, outputs, all the key information that are listed here are fully in line with what the Commission is expecting. And to do this, our very first tip is always to start the proposal development with a call analysis. So once you have found your favorite work program topic or call for proposal, try to analyze it, really highlighting specifically the language and the terms that are used by the Commission itself, and that you can also actively reuse basically for developing your own proposal. So you can use basically this list when looking for when developing your next proposal. In the next slide, so the next tip, we are looking basically at each of the sections that compose a proposal. I think most of you will be already familiar with what a proposal looks like, but mainly we have two parts. Part A, which takes place completely on the participant portal, and it mainly concerns administrative data. Part B is your narrative part, and it's made up of 5 different sections. The first 3 being excellence, impact, and implementation, and they actually refer to the 3 evaluation criteria. The last 2 ones, members of the consortium and ethics and security section, are not evaluated, actually, and they're also not part of the page limit. So we will not go in depth through this, though of course you shouldn't also underlook them. So starting with the excellence section, as you can see in this slide, we have 4 key subsections. The very first one being objectives. Here, basically using the knowledge or the insights that we have acquired during the call analysis, we try to use the language and the terms of the European Commission to draft our overall objective and then our specific objectives. The key difference here being that the overall objective is a very strategic, high-level policy, almost objective, whereas the specific objectives rather start narrowing down your project idea, and they start making your proposal quite different from the other competing proposals. Of course, you want specific objectives to be those that are achievable within the project duration and resources and disciplines involved. The next subsection is relation to the work program, where we try to give a very direct and clear proof or evidence of how our activities, methodologies, objectives planned in the proposal are responding to the challenge and to the scope provided by the work program topic. So we try to show, maybe with a table, with different bullet points, it really depends on the specific proposal, how we are addressing each of the requirements set by the Commission. Then under concept and methodology, which is maybe the core subsection here of excellence, we start introducing all the different ideas and concepts that are behind our project. This is a bit of a risky subsection in the sense that you may risk losing the attention of the evaluator. So when you have these huge pages full of text, it can be quite hard, I think, for an evaluator to keep awake, to keep alive. So try to include as many visuals as possible, tables, graphs, charts, to show in a very visual, appealing, and clear way all your concepts. Here you will also need to include this table on relevant past and ongoing projects. And our tip here is always not to make this sort of exercise where you make a research on Google or on Cordis and you simply list relevant projects, but rather on one hand to specify how your project is going to build on the knowledge that was already funded before, and also to highlight specifically those projects where your partners are involved, just to show to the Commission how they are well positioned, hopefully, in the EU research and innovation landscape. And finally, we have the ambition subsection, where we want to show to the Commission or to the evaluators how our project is going beyond the state of the art. So first of all, we start by giving a quantitative as possible baseline, showing, for instance, what are the current technologies available in the field, what are the current patents available, the current knowledge basically available, and then how we are moving forward, what kind of jump, let's say, we're doing based on the existing knowledge and products available. In the next slide, this is a question for you, actually, for participants to think a bit about. It can be quite confusing sometimes to differentiate between objectives and activities. So just to give you some clarity, hopefully, we think of objectives as the what, let's say, that we want to achieve within the project duration, within the project resources and budget as well, whereas the activities are rather the how we're going to achieve those objectives. You can already show actually this linkage or this relationship between objectives and activities in the section 1.1 by linking the specific activities to the specific objectives that you're drafting in the proposal. But we really recommend or suggest not to mix the two concepts, because also it will be quite much easier during project implementation if you have this distinction clear in mind. So in the next slide, let's start talking about impact, which is the second section of the proposal, which is also evaluated. We have two main subsections here, 2.1, which is expected impacts, and 2.2, which is measures to maximize impact. This can be often the hardest, maybe, section for researchers. It's a very political, I would say, almost, or policy-related section, in the sense that you should really describe how your proposal or how your project, on one hand, of course, is going to address the expected impacts which are listed in the work program topic. So these are usually very clear. The Commission is really making your life quite easier because there's a whole section in the topic description about this. But beyond those, you should really describe what is the expected impact of your project on many different fields. So not only on the maybe research field that you're working on, but also on other markets, other industries, other research fields, as well as different target groups, stakeholders, beyond those that you are directly involving in the project. So on one hand, of course, you can be kind of visionary and creative here, while being realistic at the same time, which is also not so easy sometimes. But you should, I think, remember that this is a very policy-related section. So you can do some background research, for instance, on the current agendas, policies, initiatives by the European Commission, by the European Union, also by other international organizations or also at national level, and try to see how you're contributing to those policy objectives. Here you should also discuss framework conditions, which are basically those conditions or those factors that exist in the context that you're operating in, where you have no control and also no responsibility on, but which might hinder your achievement of the expected impact. So on one hand, of course, you don't want to penalize your own proposal, but on the other hand, you want to show to the Commission that you are fully aware of the environment or the context that you're working on. The next subsection, measures to maximize impact, is a subsection where you will describe the measures that you have taken for exploitation, dissemination, and communication, where exploitation can be thought as the use of project results beyond the project duration. Dissemination is rather the spreading of project results, project findings to the interested target groups, whereas communication is rather looking for this mutual communication with the public. So you're really looking for feedback from potential end users and also from the public as a whole. So starting with the exploitation measures, of course, you can start listing the project results once you have the work plan finalized and once you know exactly what you're going to produce. And then one by one, you can think of who can be interested in your project results, how they're going to use them, and how you can reach them. So looking rather at the dissemination and communication channels, what is the best way to reach out to the potential users of your project results. Of course, if you want to communicate with startups, you're going to use many different, maybe online channels, specific events, which will be completely different from those that you will use rather to communicate with policymakers, for example. So try to be very tailored, personalized, according to the specific target groups that your proposal is addressing. And in this section, of course, you also want to consider carefully any intellectual property rights related issue and make sure that all your partners agree as to who is going to contribute to the development of which project result, and finally, who is going to own those project results. Again, the more agreement you can find, the more decisions you can make at this stage. On one hand, the better your evaluation will be, because evaluators will be able to understand that all partners are on board, are on the same page. And then also project implementation will be a lot smoother, a lot easier. If we go to the next slide, again, a question for you to ask yourselves and maybe can help a little bit your next proposal development. We really want to emphasize that communication and dissemination measures should be as tailored as possible to the specific target groups of your proposal. So don't have a let's say, a standard sort of dissemination and communication plan, but try to really think of the potential users of your project results, the stakeholders themselves, and what is the best way, what are the best channels to reach out to them. You can also add a timeline in this section because, of course, users might differ according to the project stage, or not users, but rather stakeholders might differ during different project stages, and you may want to reach to them in different ways. Next, we are looking, the next slide, yes, at section 3, the final section, implementation. Here again, we have 4 main sections, subsections. Starting with a work plan. I'm sure you're all quite familiar with what a work package looks like, how it should be described. But just a few tips for you. Of course, they should be driven by the project-specific objectives, so there should be this consistency between section 1 and section 3, of course. Another sort of mistake or problem that we see quite often with our training course participants is that they tend to overpromise a little bit, because of course you want to show that you're ambitious, but this can be very risky in the sense that if you get funded, you will actually need to implement and to deliver everything that you have promised. So there are some tables, for instance, in this subsection, such as the list of deliverables, that you can play a little bit around with. So try to check, for instance, how many deliverables you have promised per partner or per month, and then you can maybe readjust in case you see that one of the partners is really overwhelmed. Other tables can also help you, such as the person months table. Try to really make sure that you will be able to actually implement everything that you promise. Another frequent evaluation comment that we have seen lately is that not enough details are provided in the task distribution. So although you have maybe allocated some person months to specific partners, it's not clear how those partners are contributing to the specific tasks in that work package. So even if everything is perfectly clear in your mind, of course, and you're giving maybe for granted some things, try to rather make them as explicit as possible. Try to give as many details as possible, rather repeating concepts. The next subsection is management structure, procedures and milestones. Here, of course, you can have a kind of sort of standard section that you want to include for all the proposals, but then again, according to the specific requirements of your proposal or to the specific added values of your proposal, you want to tailor this section. For instance, you may want to consider specific structures, specific external boards, such as a dissemination and exploitation committee, an IPR committee, an end user group. So to have external individuals or external organizations who are not full partners in your proposal, but that you want to involve in very specific, very detailed activities. Maybe you want to invite them to workshops, maybe you just need very, very short feedback from them. So try to include these types of structures whenever it makes sense for your proposal. Consortium as a whole is the third subsection here. And here you should demonstrate how the partners collectively, so the partners as a team, basically cover all the necessary skills and expertise that are required to carry out those project activities that you have planned in your proposal. So it's not really the point here to sell, let's say, from a marketing perspective, your individual partners. You don't need here to show that they are the best in Europe in their field. That would be rather section 4, members of the consortium. Here we really want to show that all together you have put together the best team to cover maybe the geographical region that you're targeting, or the specific stakeholders, users, types of organizations, or rather it's more about multidisciplinarity. And of course also refer to partners' cooperation history whenever this exists in your proposal. So the more partners have worked together in the past, the more convincing the team will be for evaluators. And finally, here we have resources to be committed, which is not really the budget yet. It's more about planning the necessary resources to carry out your activities. So starting first of all with the time needed from all partners to implement the activities with the person months table. And then you can go work package by work package and think of all the resources that these partners may need. It could be equipment, it could be conference fees, open access fees, anything that you should plan in detail before being granted. It's a consultative process. Of course, this is not a democracy and not a dictatorship, but it's at the same time. Of course, the coordinator will have the last word, but the budget and the list of resources should be really, so the budget should be really developed bottom up. So according to the specific resources that will be needed, each partner will have a different budget. It shouldn't be the other way around, that a partner is looking for a specific budget and then you adjust resources accordingly. Moving to the next slide. This is again a sort of invitation for participants here to think. The budget is not important for the project per se, of course it is, but it's more important for yourself. It's more important for you to have a detailed, let's say, a detailed explanation of all the resources that will be needed. In part A on the participant portal, you will need to fill in an existing table for the Commission, which is quite of an overview, so it's not very much detailed. For yourself, and we typically actually give also templates in our training courses, you should have as many details as possible. For example, you may want to break down person months from the work package level to the task level, or you may want to break down the other costs for work package by work package, maybe even task by task, so that you have a complete overview, and it will be a lot easier during project implementation. Next slide. So the budget, again, is important, especially for you. We do suggest a limited overestimation, not more than 5%. You know that, of course, the budget for the proposal should be as close as possible to the actual costs that you will incur. But on the other hand, reallocations actually are possible during project implementation, both between different partners and within the same partner between different cost categories. So if it may happen that maybe you didn't foresee costs for publications, for open access, then you may maybe reallocate a little bit of the budget, for instance, from travel costs. That is always possible. Another important factor or element here is that your budget is not really evaluated by evaluators. They're rather looking at whether each partner has the necessary resources. So they're not really judging the numbers, they're not really judging the salary rates, for instance, that you have provided, partner by partner. They wouldn't also be able to do so. It's more about really making sure that each partner has the necessary costs foreseen to actually produce the results that you have promised. Next slide. I will now give back the floor to Gabriella, so that you can hear maybe from an actual evaluator what happens once you submit your proposal.
Thank you. So really just a few final words, because we are kind of running out of time. So you could try out actually this evaluation process, which is extremely useful. Being an evaluator, you become also a much better proposal writer. So my first tip would be to try and register in the expert database and see if you are selected for a Horizon 2020 call that you can evaluate, and then you will see the process, you will see how the evaluators think, you will see all of the different mindsets of the evaluators, because you will meet professors, you will meet researchers, you will meet engineers, and you will meet business-minded people, and they all think a little bit differently about your proposal, and you have to be convincing for all of them. So that's a really good and nice exercise actually to try out. So just a tip, if you have the chance, then register in the database, try it out if you can be selected, especially if you have business or industrial expertise in the background. So if we go to the next slide. So what are the evaluators looking for? It is crucial that you understand the evaluation process and what are those questions that the evaluators ask about your proposal, and then how they try to answer. So one of the exercises you have to make, or that is extremely useful to make, is to give the draft ready proposal to someone, to a colleague who wasn't involved in the proposal development, of course, has a general idea about the project idea and the area itself, but they, or he or she, was not involved in the proposal development in detail, and then give her or to him the evaluation criteria, and then give him or her 3 hours, not more. Okay, only within 3 hours, he or she should read the 70 pages and then give detailed remarks on your proposal. And that will boost extremely your proposal, because you will not see those minor shortcomings that might be still existing in your proposal, but another colleague with an external view might see those. And that will help you to reach those 14 or 15 points that you might need with a generic 11% success rate in Horizon 2020. So try these two things. The final slide just gives you some additional tips about the evaluation. You should be realistic, as Valentina said, because the document that you submit to the Commission becomes legally binding as an annex to the grant agreement. You always have to keep that in mind. You should emphasize your basic core ideas throughout all of these 3 sections. You might have a series of genius ideas, how to solve this problem, what kind of methodology should be used for this task, and so on and so on. But you have to have those 2, 3 key selling ideas that will be then repeated throughout the proposal and will be kind of kept in the evaluator's mind all the time throughout the proposal, and then they will always find the arguments to support the proposal instead of trying to find the mistakes in the proposal. That's really important. That is a common work. So going back to the consortium, you have to have the people who are committed to your project and the proposal. If you try to do it on your own, no matter how good proposal writer you are, you will not succeed. You have to have the contribution from the others and the commitment from the others, and then you will be able to succeed. So good luck. I'm sure that we could talk another 3-4 hours about the topic. But if you have any questions, I'm encouraging you to send these questions to Minerva or to the project, the generic info address. We will then answer all of the questions. We are happy to do that.
Gabriella and Valentina, thank you very much indeed. There are a couple of questions actually in the chat box. I don't know whether you can just address those. One is about open access. I know this is a question that a number of people have posed to me on various engagements we've had. Is there a recommended amount for allocation to costs associated with open access for Horizon 2020 projects? Is that an area divided?
There is no allocated amount in that sense. Of course, Commission loves open access, and of course you can have the choice to join the open access, the pilot, so that also the research data can become openly accessible for the researchers through the very specific process. But I think the question refers to only the publications themselves. So in case of publications, you have 2 ways, the green and the gold. And in the gold version, you make the publication openly accessible right at the publication time. And in that case, indeed, you have to pay to the journal in order, of course, for the article to be reviewed and then to be published and so on. And then there's no, of course, fee for those who are interested in the article, but it will be openly accessible for everyone, any interested stakeholder. The cost for an open access article can vary between, let's say, €2,000 to €20,000. So that's kind of a big, a wide range, I would say. So it's really hard to say how much. On a generic basis, I would say that €3,500 we allocate normally for one article to be openly accessible with the gold way.
That's very helpful guidance. So again, as a point that you've raised a number of times in the webinar, is to be clear about where you might want, where to best effect to actually publish open access in order to deliver the best results for the project in terms of spreading information about the results. And secondly, what's your advice regarding stage 1 and stage 2 proposals? Are there any special tips and hints regarding your approach to those 2-stage calls?
Well, the most important thing is probably, because sometimes beneficiaries tend to say, okay, in the first stage, the idea is the most important, and then in the second stage, we deal with all of the minor issues. Well, we kind of say not to, because between the first and the second stage, you do not have a lot of time actually to put together all those minor details. So as soon as you can agree with all of your partners, it's really important, have all of the partners booked also in the first stage. So do not try to change the consortium partners between the first and the second stage. That is not recommended. So have all of your partners committed in the very beginning, in the first stage, and then try also during the first stage to discuss with your partners. You do not have to write down everything, but try to discuss with your partners how are we going to handle these and those and the additional questions regarding the work plan, regarding the task distribution, regarding the exploitation and the IPR issues, so that you do not end up in the situation that when you try to put together the second stage proposal where you have really limited time, then you end up with discussing about minor issues instead of really focusing on the actual proposal writing. That is not a good thing. So what I would suggest, try to invest a little bit more effort into the first stage, even of course if there might be a chance not to win the first stage. But if you are committed to your idea, if you think that the idea is really, really good, then I would say it's worth the effort to invest a little bit more in the first stage and then to have less problems during the second stage proposal development phase. That would be my approach.
Thank you very much. Very good advice there. I think with one thing that came across to me very much in the webinar is that one of the things you need to keep checking is that you're answering the question. You're answering the call, and keep validating that. And that's as important in stage 1 as it is in stage 2. So I think on that note we can leave you. But if we get any more questions, obviously we will forward them on. Next slide, please. So thank you again very much to Valentina and Gabriella. So really just as a few closing remarks, and I particularly draw Valentina and Gabriella's attention to our final event for CombiBiz, which is actually going to happen in Budapest in February. So we hope that we'll be in communication with you, and maybe we can even tempt you to run one of our short workshops, around proposal writing, which I'm sure would go down extremely well. So just a reminder for those who are listening live and those who are going to look at this online afterwards, we have a number of deadlines coming up. We have our bursaries available at the moment still. Applications close quite soon for the one in Prague in November, and we have another one in Budapest just before our final meeting. And we have our open at the moment our photo competition, for which you can win €500. And again, all the information is available on our website. So do feel inspired, pick up your cameras, visually capture the essence of your research. And I'm sure that Valentina and Gabriella would agree that the more visual you can be within limits in your proposal is also important. More perhaps in terms of tables and graphs for the proposal, but try and be a bit creative in the way that you put across your information and your knowledge. Next slide, please. So I think this is your home city, Gabriella and Valentina, and we look forward to hopefully meeting you again there, if not before. So at that point, I'm going to close the webinar. Thank everybody for tuning in, and thank again Gabriella and Valentina for your very clear advice about how to proceed with Horizon 2020 proposals. Thank you very much indeed. Goodbye.
Thank you for having us.
Bye.
Bye.